In this video, we'll build a responsive HTML email template with tables. Okay guys, so I'm excited to share this responsive HTML email template with you. My goal for this video is to get up to 300 likes. And if you end up liking the video, remember to subscribe and turn on your notifications for new tutorials. Alright, so let's take a look at the email template design. So from the top of it, we have our social media icons followed by the logo, then the GIF banner background image, and the text section underneath that with the centered heading, paragraph text, and button. Then we have our responsive two-column section with the image on the left and the text and button on the right, followed by the background color section, and lastly the footer at the bottom. So the easiest way to tell if an email template is responsive is to simply size the window down in Gmail, and if it transforms to the single column layout from the two columns, you can tell that it's responsive. And before we take a look at the email template in my browser, let's look at it on my cell phone. So on the right, we have it in Apple Mail, which is going to display a light background color. So this is the color that we'll be seeing when we lay out the template in the web browser. And on the left, we have Gmail, which is displaying it in dark mode. So if we scroll down, it's going to appear a little wider in Gmail because it doesn't have the black border off to the side like in Apple Mail, but it looks pretty good nonetheless. So with that, now let's go over to Google Chrome, and I want to show you how the responsive two-column section resizes in Google Chrome, because while it will show responsive in the Gmail desktop window, it's not going to resize the content with the media queries that we'll be adding. So you'll notice that the content here on the right for the two-column section will be wider once we get underneath 600 pixels, and as I said, we'll be doing that with media queries using CSS that will work with our HTML tables for the email template. Okay, so with that, I'll put the smaller window aside, and in order to get started with the tutorial, in the description of this video, I'll have a link so you can download the tutorial starter files. So this will include the index.html file, which I'll be opening in the free program called Visual Studio Code, which you see in the background as the text editor. Then it also has the image folder, which will include all of the images for the email template, including the GIF banner image. Then you'll also see this blue file where it says HTML email course. So this page will include a promotional video for my complete HTML email mastery course and a discount link to the course. And if you check out the preview video of the 10 email templates and email signature included in the course, the email template that we'll build in this tutorial will be most like the GIF background image template that you see right here. Then the last thing that I'll mention before we get started is, as I said, we'll be using the free text editor called Visual Studio Code. And if you're not familiar with it, I have a lesson on my website at the resources page. So if you go to w3newbie.com/resources, you can check out the Visual Studio Code text editor lesson that you see right here, where I'll go over the extensions and shortcuts that I'll be using in the video. Okay, so now let's go over to Visual Studio Code and see what's already included for us inside of the starter files. So as you see, we'll have some head information, some styling started, and then the comments in the body section. First, I'll select the Go Live button in the lower right-hand corner to start the live server feature covered in the Visual Studio Code lesson on my website. And with the gray background, you can see that we're connected, but if I just change this to black and save it, you'll see the background color change. So that tells us that we're connected to Google Chrome with Visual Studio Code. Okay, so with that, let's go over what's already included for us, starting with the doc type at the top. So in HTML email, we still use XHTML 1.0 transitional for the most compatible document type with email clients. Next, we have our meta tag for the character type UTF-8, which is standard for letters and numbers on the internet, followed by a compatibility tag for Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge, then with device width initial scale 1 for mobile devices, followed by the title tag, which isn't necessary when sending HTML emails, but if you want to send people to a live page where your email template is displayed, you can use a title. Next, we have some internal style included for us here, including the body tag first, where we have margin set to 0, so we don't have any space to the top or the sides of our email template when the page is sized down in width. And we have the background color set to the gray shade with all C's as the hex value. Then beneath that, we have some resets to get rid of border spacing, padding, and borders with tables, table data tags, and images. Next, we have a media query started for us at the 600 pixel breakpoint, which is the responsive breakpoint where we'll go from a single column to 2 columns, and we'll be resizing the responsive section underneath 600 pixels in width. Then in the body, as you know, we have HTML comments laid out for us for the different sections of the template. Okay, so now we're ready to start laying out our HTML, starting with centering our email template. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll make sure that it stays centered inside of the body and email clients. So we're going to use an HTML4 tag, which is no longer with HTML5, but still works perfectly well for email, and that's the center tag. So I'll add center, and I'm going to give it a class using the period called wrapper. And then we'll take the closing center tag and move that all the way down to the bottom of our HTML comments, just before the closing body tag. And I'll indent this once. Then we can start the actual table, which will include all of the different sections of the email template. And I'm going to give this table a class called main to reference in the CSS. Then we'll also give our table a width of 100% to make sure that it takes up all of the space inside of that center tag that we added. And similar to the center tag, let's move the closing table tag down to just above the center tag underneath our HTML comments. Then I'll just change the indentation around here a little bit. And remember to delete the closing tag up here. And now we can go up to our CSS to reference the classes that we just added, starting with the wrapper. So I'll use the period and then add our wrapper text followed by the swirly brackets. And for this center tag, we'll want to make sure that there's no space off to the sides. So we're going to give it a width of 100% similar to the table. And then we're also going to add something called table layout fixed, which is basically going to make it so this element will be no wider than the table element that's inside of our center tag. Next, to make sure that email clients respect the background color that we gave to the body with the all C's hex value, we're going to add that to the wrapper as well here by adding background color, then the hex value all C's. Then lastly, for the wrapper, I like to add a little bit of space to the bottom of email templates to make them stand out. So this is one of the optional parts of the tutorial, but I'm going to add padding bottom of 40 pixels to the bottom of the wrapper. Okay, so now we're ready to start styling the table, but first I'm going to add a little bit of dummy text here inside of a heading 1. So I'll just write test for the text, and we'll come back to this in a moment once we start adding our content inside of the table. But first, let's style the main class for that table in our CSS. So we'll want to reference it using a period again because that's a class. And then let's set the background color to white using all F's for our hex value. Then to reinforce the centering of the email template, we'll use margin 0 auto, and we'll also give it a width of 100% in the CSS in addition to the attribute that we added. Then for the width, we're going to set a max width of 600 pixels, which is pretty much the standard width that you should use for email templates to make sure that they render and fit properly in all email clients. Next, we'll add border spacing 0 because this is a table. And then we can set our font family. So I'm going to use the font family sans serif to avoid the default Times New Roman. And for the color of our font, we're going to use a dark gray hex value of 4A, 4A, 4A. All right, with that set, we're ready to address the test text that we added. So you're not seeing the white background because we haven't added a layer of table row, table data, and table tags inside of our existing table. So we'll add tr, td, and then a table for table row, table data, and then a table. And we're going to give our table its width attribute of 100%. Okay, so now once this is set, if we add our test text back in the heading 1 and save it, we'll see that we have the white background displaying for our table. So with that, we're ready to start laying out the first section, which is the social media icons up at the top of the template. So let's start with a new set of table row and table data tags. Then we can start adding our content inside of these. So we'll add tr, and inside of that we'll have our td tag. Then we can add some space, and we're going to add our social media icons, which will be inside of the image folder. So for example, we have white-facebook.png, which we'll start with, and we're going to wrap our icons with links. So we'll have our image tag inside of the anchor text tag with an A, so A and then img, and I'll leave the link blank with a hashtag. Then we can add img / for the folder, followed by white-facebook.png. Then if we save it, we're not going to be able to see the icon yet with the white background, so let's add our background color with the blue shade to our table data tag wrapping around the images. So we'll add style background color, then the hex value is 4980D2. And once we save it, we can see our Facebook icon now. And what we can do is resize it. So let's give it a width of 30 or 30 pixels, but we don't need to add pixels because of the width attribute. And then what we can do is add some padding around it, and we'll align our text center. So let's start with the padding. So I'm going to add 8 pixels to the top, 0 left, right, and 5 pixels bottom. And then we'll also add text align center, which is going to center our images because they're inside of the anchor text tag. Okay, so let's add the rest of them. We can just copy this first one and paste it in 4 times. Then all we'll have to do is change the image URL. So we'll add Twitter, then YouTube, then LinkedIn, and lastly, Instagram. And now if we save it, we'll have our social media bar up top matching the finished version, so we can drop down to the logo section next. So let's move down to that HTML comment, and we're going to use the same type of table and table row, table data layout that we did for the social media icons because we'll want some space around our logo. So once you have that set, remember to add width and 100% for the table. Then inside of that, we can add our new set of table row and table data tags, followed by our logo image, which will be wrapped in a link again, so A, then img. And in this case, I'll add a link just to show you. So I'll add a link to my website. Then we can add the logo image, which is img/w3newbie.png. And if we save it and take a look, similar to the social icons, we'll need to resize it. So let's give it a width of 180. And once this is changed, we'll also need to center it, and we'll add some padding. So we'll add style, text align center, and I'm going to add padding of 10 pixels all around. Okay, so now what we can do is we have the option to add a title attribute. So if we hover over the image, we'll get the logo text. And what we can do is just add that title attribute here, and I'll write logo. Then if we take a moment to hover over it, we'll get the logo text appearing. And additionally, we can add alternative text. So if the image doesn't display, so I'll just mess up the image link, we'll see the logo text displaying where the logo image should be. Okay, so next we can drop down to the GIF background image, and this section is going to be a little bit different with the HTML because we're not going to need any spacing around the image. So we'll be able to do away with our second layer of table row and table data tags in addition to the table. So we'll just add tr and td. Then inside of that, we'll have our link followed by the image, and I'll leave it blank for the link. And then the image source will be img/snow.gif. And if we go back and save it, there we have our GIF image. Then we can also add a banner alternative text here. And I'm going to set the width to 600. Then we'll need to set a max width for smaller screen so it doesn't span outside of the width of the screen. by adding max width 100%. So now if we flex the window down, the GIF image will resize with the window. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the title, text, and button section. So let's work our way down to the HTML comment for that. And we're going to start it off similar to how we did the first couple of sections with the table row, table data, and table. And I'm going to give the table a width of 100%. Then inside of this, we'll have a new set of table row and table data tags. And inside of this, we'll have our paragraph tag, which we'll use for the HTML email template course text. Okay, so let's add our paragraph tag. And then I'll write HTML email template. And since we want our course text to be a different color, we're going to separate it with the strong tag for bold. And then we can write course. So now if we save it and take a look, we'll have just our regular HTML email template, then bold course text. So what we'll do is let's increase the font size by adding style, font size 20 pixels. And in addition to adding this, we're also going to make our text bold for the first bit of the text with font weight bold. And then for the strong text, we're going to make the course text appear in the same blue shade that we used earlier. So let's add style to the strong tag, and we'll give it the color 49. Let me see where it is. There it is, 4980D2. So hashtag 4980D2 for the hex value. And there we have our text appearing how we want it, but we'll also want to center it and add some padding around it. So let's use the table data tag that sits above the paragraph tag, and we'll add style, text align center, and padding. We'll give it a padding of 15 pixels all around. And this is also going to take care of centering the text underneath it as well as the button. So padding 15 pixels all around. And now if we take a look, it's starting to look similar to the finished version. So let's move on down to the paragraph text that appears underneath that. So I'll copy all this text. If you want, you can just use Ipsum text here. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to decrease the font size from 16 pixels, which is the inherent font size in Google Chrome, to 15 pixels, which will look a little bit nicer on smaller screens when looking at the email. And then we're also going to give it a line height of 23 pixels to space out the paragraph text. And lastly, we're going to add some additional padding to our paragraph text, a little bit on top, and mainly to separate it from the button underneath. So let's add padding 5 pixels top, then 0 left right, and 15 pixels to the bottom. Okay, so that looks good, and we're ready to add our button. So for the button, we're going to use an anchor text A tag here, and we're going to give it a class called button, so we can style it in the CSS in the head section of the website, and I'll just write view course for the text. Okay, so now if we save it, we're just going to have text appearing where the button is, but when we style this button, where you see the text right here, the style that we give it will also apply to the read more button, which we'll add later. So let's take care of styling the button now with our CSS. So we'll reference the class with the period, then button, and we'll use the same blue shade for the background color with the hex value 4980D2. So you can copy the hex value from beneath or type it out. Then for the color, we're going to change it to white from the inherent blue hyperlink text or text color. And once we've done that, let's get rid of the underline with text decoration none. And then we'll add some spacing around it with padding 12 pixels top bottom, 20 pixels left right. And we'll add some border radius to match the original with 5 pixels. to make the edges a little bit softer. Then lastly, we'll add font weight bold. Okay, so now if we save it, we're looking like the original other than the spacing that appears underneath the button. So let's add some additional padding to that section using the first table data tag. So we'll add style, padding bottom, and 40 pixels. Okay, so that looks good. And now we can add the blue border that appears underneath that. So we do have an HTML comment for this blue border, and all we'll need to add is a table row and a table data tag. Then we're going to give our table data tag a height. So we'll give it a height of 5 or 5 pixels. And then we can set its background color. So we'll say background color and 4980D2. Okay, and then once we save it, there we have our blue horizontal line appearing underneath that text and button section. Okay, so now for the interesting part of the design, which is the responsive two-column section. So we're going to start this off similar to how we did the previous sections, using our table row, table data, and table tag. Then we'll give our table its width of 100%. Then inside of this, we're going to have a new set of table row and table data tags, but we're going to give this an identifier class, which will wrap around the two sections. So let's add table row, and inside of that, we'll give our table data tag a class called two-columns, which we can use to add our CSS to this tag. And then we'll have a table for each one of the two columns, which we're going to give a class name to as well. So let's add table class column. Then inside of this table, we'll have a new set of table row and table data tags. And this table data tag we're going to use to add padding around the sections, which we're going to remove using the media queries to make the image larger and the text section wider on smaller screens. So let's add the class padding to the table data tag here. Then we'll need one additional table inside of this to identify the content. So we'll simply write table class content, and then our last tr and td tags before we're ready to add our actual content. So let's start with the image, which will be inside of a link. And I'm going to leave the link blank. Then the cell phone image or iPhone is going to be 560 by 420.jpg. Okay, so once that's added, if we save it and take a look, similar to the other images, we'll need to resize it. And I usually make images twice the size for Retina display. And we're going to give this a width of 260 pixels. And we'll also set a max width with the style attribute. So we'll add style max width 260 pixels. And this value is going to change using our CSS when we remove the padding for the smaller screens with the media query. So for now, what we can do is let's add the content where it says create custom design. So we're going to use this whole table class column. So we can simply copy this and paste it underneath. Then we'll remove the image and replace it with our paragraph text. So I'll delete this and start off with the P tag, and I'll write create custom designs for the text. Okay, and once this text is added, to match the original, similar to what we did with the first set of bold text, let's add some style here. So let's increase the font size to 17 pixels, and then I'll add font weight bold. And now if we save it, there we have our create custom designs text appearing. So let's add the paragraph text that appears underneath it as well. So I'll copy this where you can add lorem ipsum text and add a new paragraph tag. And then with this paragraph text, similar to what we did previously with the other button, which we'll add with the class button here inside of our link, is I'm going to add some padding to the bottom of the paragraph text, because if we look at it now, we're not going to have the separation between that and the button. So let's add style and padding bottom 15 pixels. Okay, so now if we save it, it looks pretty good, except for we're going to need some space around this entire section, which will include on top and underneath the button. So what we can do is add that as we reference the toColumns class, which is the first class that we gave to this section for the table data tag here. So I'm going to copy this toColumns and add that to the styling in the head section. So we'll add our period for the class, then toColumns. And in order to center our columns on mobile, we'll add text align center for underneath 600 pixels. So for example, if we size the window down, there you see the centered tables. And next, we're going to add something called font size 0 to do away with inherent font size that some email clients want to add to this table data tag. And then lastly, let's add the padding to the top and bottom. So I'm going to add padding 40 pixels top bottom and then 0 left right. And now with that, you're going to see that our font has disappeared. So we'll want to bring the font size back after adding font size 0, which we'll do in just a moment. But first, let's take care of the table class column that we added. So first we'll want to reference the toColumns class and then the column class for the table inside of it. And we're going to give our table a width of 100% for smaller screens, and then we're going to give it a max width of 300 pixels because it's a two-column section inside of the 600 pixel template. And in order to get our tables to display next to one another, we'll add display inline dash block, and we're also going to add vertical align top. And now when we take a look, if we size it down, they'll stack vertically and aligned centered on screens smaller than the 600 pixels, and then they'll go back to being in line. So next, let's add some padding around the sections to separate them from the edges by referencing the padding class. So I'm going to copy the same style declaration and paste it in, then change column to padding. And we can set the padding to what we want up to 20 pixels because that's what we're left with on either side, given that the image is 260 and we have 300 to work with. So if we use 20 pixels, that's going to take up all of the space that we have for that section. Okay, so now let's bring back our font styling and we're going to align our text to the left. So we'll want to reference the content class, which is attached to our innermost table. So we'll use toColumns and then content. Then I'm going to align the text to the left and we'll add font size 15 pixels. And I'm going to add line height 20 pixels so our paragraph text is spaced out a bit. Okay, so now once we save it, we should be matching up to the finished version, and we can also stack our columns, but we don't have the responsive changes to it yet with the different sized image and text section. All right, so let's move on to the second to last section with the blue background and white text. So we'll scroll down to the blue background quote HTML comment and start our section off with our table row, table data, and table tags, followed by the width 100%. And then we'll have a new set of TR and TD tags. And inside of that, we'll have our paragraph text. So I'll add the P tag. And I'm going to copy this text right here and paste it in. Then I'll add the text underneath it where it says Jessica C. So with that, that's all the HTML for this section. The rest will be styling. So if we take a look, our text is going to be aligned to the left. So let's center it using the table data tag that wraps around the paragraph text by adding text align center. Then we can set the blue background color, which we've been using. So background color, then the hex value 4980D2. And then we'll also add some padding around the section of 15 pixels all around. And we'll set our text color to white. And I'm also going to increase the font size of all of the paragraph text to 18 pixels. Then lastly, we'll just style the top text. So I'm going to give it a font weight of bold. And we'll leave the Jessica C text at the regular font weight. All right, so with that section matching the original, let's move on to the last section, which is the footer content. So we'll drop down to that HTML comment and start off with our table row, table data, and table tag. And I'll give it its width of 100%. And then we'll have another set of table row and table data tags. And inside of that, we'll have our image for the logo to start with. So A and IMG. Then I'll leave the link blank, and we'll add IMG/W3newbie, the same logo as in the header. And then we'll give this a width of 160 pixels. Okay, so once saved, there we have the logo. But let's first set the background color to match the finished version. And we're going to give this a light gray background color with the hex value EF, EF, EF. Then let's add some padding. So I'm going to add padding of 30 pixels to the top and 10 pixels left, right. Then we'll center it with text align center, which will also, as we know, take care of the text inside of this section as well. Okay, so with the logo set, let's add the text that appears underneath that with W3 newbie HTML email. So we'll add that paragraph text and then a new set of paragraph tags for the street address. And underneath this, we're going to have an email link. So we'll add P and then A for the link. And then to prompt an email to open, when somebody clicks the link, we'll use mail to followed by colon and the email address. Then we can add the actual text which we'll display. So I'll write email at W3newbie. And similarly, underneath this for the telephone link, we'll use tel colon followed by the phone number. And then we can add the text which will appear for the phone number. So when somebody clicks the phone number now, it's going to prompt them to make a call, or if they're on their computer, open up something like FaceTime. So if we save it, there we have our two links, and we'll add the last one as well where it says unsubscribe. So we'll add paragraph and then link, and then unsubscribe for the text. And I'm going to change this font size to 13 pixels to make it a little bit smaller than the rest, with font size 13 pixels. And before we go about changing the color of the links, let's add the last bit of content, which is the blue border displaying at the bottom of the template. So we'll add a new table row and table data tag, and this will be similar to the blue line. So we'll just need to add a height here, and I'll give it a height of 10 or 10 pixels. And then we can add the style for the background color, which as we know is the hex value 4980D2. Okay, so with that, let's add some styling to our link text by removing the underline, and we'll change the color. So we just need to reference A for the link, and we'll add text decoration none to get rid of the underline. And then we can also add the color using the blue hex value that we've been referencing. So now if we save it, we have all of our content at the full width matching up to the original, except for I think a little bit of padding is different around that section, but that's okay. So you can adjust the padding to your preference from 15 pixels or 20 pixels. So now what we'll do is we'll add our media query CSS to resize the responsive section and make it larger on smaller screens. So we'll drop down to the media query CSS and we'll want to reference the image, which is inside of the content class for the two columns. So we'll add two columns, content and img. And if you remember, for this image, we have a width set to 260 pixels with max width 260. So we're going to increase the image size to take up all 300 pixels of the table. So we'll add width 300 pixels and exclamation point important to override the 260 pixel value. And we'll do the same with the max width. So max width 300 pixels and exclamation point important. So now what we'll need to do is remove the padding around the section so the content matches the width of the image, and that's also going to center the section because it's a little off center right now. So we'll reference the padding class, and we can reference it with or without the two columns class here. So I'll just write padding with the class, and we're going to remove the padding to the right with padding right 0 exclamation point important. And we'll do the same for the left. So padding left 0 and then important. And now it's going to take up the full 300 pixels for that section and it's going to be centered. So now we have our responsive HTML email template matching the original. And I'm going to use a responsive website design tool here to open up the mobile version on the right so we can look at the difference between the full width and the mobile version here. So as we size the window up, we turn it into the two column section layout instead of the single column on mobile. Okay, so now that our template is completed, we can test our email template by emailing it to ourselves with a tool that I'm going to show you. But first, I need to explain that our images that we're using inside of the template right now are local. So in email or Gmail, for example, we're not going to see the images because they need to be live links. So what you can do is go to placeholder.com and you can simply use a placeholder image as one example. So if I just copy the image address from one of the images at placeholder.com and then paste it in, I can change the dimensions to 30 by 30 for the social media icon here. And if we take a look, we have a placeholder image and that's going to show up when you send an email. Alternatively, you can upload your images to the web, so you can use a free image hosting program like imgbb.com, or you can use a web hosting account if you have one. And once your images are uploaded to the internet, we can send an email to ourselves using the free program at putsmail.com. So Putsmail has an inliner feature where we can inline our CSS, or we can just send a new test to ourselves and it will inline our CSS for us as well. So I'll add an email title or subject line by saying responsive HTML email template. And if you're not familiar with it, what I mean by inlining the CSS, which we can do by using the feature where it says move my CSS in line, is that's going to take the CSS right here and it's going to add it into our HTML tags in line here inside of the actual tags instead of being an internal style sheet like we have in the head section. So I have a file off screen with live image links and I'm going to paste that HTML in here for the template with the live images, then select move my CSS in line and I'm not a robot, and then I'll hit send mail because I added my email address that I'm going to send it to off screen. And now if I go over to Gmail, there we have our email template displaying. And if we scroll down, we'll see the full template layout. And we can also size the window down. The only difference between the Gmail window and cell phones is the two column section isn't going to increase in size when we size the screen window down here. But on mobile devices, as we saw at the beginning of the tutorial, it will display at the full 300 pixel width like you see right here. So that does it for the complete tutorial. I want to thank you for watching. Please remember to check out my full HTML email course, which there will be a link to in the video description, or you can check out the file that's included in the starter files to get a preview of the course. And I'll see you inside of the course if you end up signing up. Thanks for watching.